I stood at the gate blocking the only road to my cabin and felt my blood pressure spike as I read the brand new sign. Private HOA property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. This was absolutely insane. I had been driving this same dirt road to my grandfather's cabin in the mountains outside Asheville, North Carolina, for 30 years. My grandfather built that cabin back in 1952, and when he passed 5 years ago, he left it to me along with all the property records. I came up here every other weekend to escape the chaos of my job as a structural engineer in Charlotte. The cabin was my sanctuary, my refuge from the world. And now some HOA had the audacity to block my only access route. I pulled out my phone and called the number on the sign. A woman answered on the third ring with a syrupy sweet voice that immediately set my teeth on edge. Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association. This is Brenda speaking. How may I help you? Yeah, hi. My name is Xavier. I own a cabin at the end of Forest Creek Road, and someone just put up a gate blocking the only road to my property. I need this removed immediately. The sweet tone vanished instantly. Mr. Xavier, that road is private HOA property. If you own property in our community, you need to pay your HOA dues to receive access. Are you current on your payments? I don't live in your community, I said, trying to keep my voice level. My cabin has been there since 1952. I've been using this road for 3 decades. You can't just block it. Sir, Forest Creek Road belongs to Pinewood Hills HOA. It was transferred to us in 2018. If you want access, you need to join the HOA and pay the initiation fee of $5,000 plus monthly dues of $350. I actually laughed out loud. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not paying you a dime. That road has been there longer than your development. Then I suggest you find another way to your property, Mr. Xavier. Have a blessed day. She hung up. I stood there staring at my phone in disbelief. This could not be happening. I drove back down the mountain to the small town of Meadowbrook where the county records office was located. It was Friday afternoon, and I needed answers before the weekend. The records office closed at 5, and I made it with 20 minutes to spare. A tired-looking clerk named Margaret helped me pull up the property records. I showed her my grandfather's deed and explained the situation. Let me look up the road deed, she said, typing into her computer. Her eyes widened as she read. Oh my. Mr. Xavier, according to these records, Forest Creek Road was never actually a public road. It's listed as a private road and the deed holder is. She scrolled down. Christopher Xavier. Is that your grandfather? My heart started pounding. Yes, he died in 2021. Well, the road deed was never transferred after his death. It's still in his name. If you inherited his property, you should have inherited the road too. She printed out several documents and highlighted the relevant sections. See here. The road was built by your grandfather in 1952 as a private access road to his property. He owned the land it sits on. There's nothing in here about any transfer to an HOA. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with confusion. Then how did the HOA get the idea they own it? Margaret shrugged. Mistakes happen. Sometimes HOA developers draw up plats that include roads they don't actually own. Or maybe someone filed incorrect paperwork. Either way, if you have your grandfather's will and it left you everything, that road is yours. I drove back to Charlotte with my mind racing. This was going to be a fight, but at least I had the truth on my side. I spent the entire weekend going through my grandfather's papers. Sure enough, his will was crystal clear. I leave all my property, real and personal, including all land structures and easements, to my grandson Xavier. The road deed was in a folder with the cabin deed. My grandfather had been meticulous about his records. The deed clearly showed he owned a strip of land 50 feet wide and 3/4 of a mile long that comprised Forest Creek Road. It connected his property to the public highway below. Monday morning, I took a personal day and drove to see a property attorney in Asheville. Her name was Patricia Moreland, and she came highly recommended. I spread all my documents across her desk. She spent an hour reviewing everything, making notes and occasionally pulling up information on her computer. Finally, she looked up at me with a slight smile. "Mr. Xavier, you have an open and shut case. You own that road. You own the land under it. The HOA has no legal claim whatsoever. In fact, they're committing trespass by installing that gate on your property. So what do I do? First, we file a formal complaint with the county to correct any erroneous records that might show the HOA owning the road. Second, we send a cease and desist letter to the HOA demanding they remove the gate immediately. Third, if they don't comply within 72 hours, we file for a temporary restraining order and sue them for damages and trespass. How much is this going to cost me? I'll take it on contingency. If we win, which we will, the HOA will pay all legal fees plus damages. This is honestly one of the clearest cases I've seen. They have no leg to stand on. Patricia drafted a scathing cease and desist letter that afternoon. She had it hand-delivered to the HOA office by a process server. I went with him, just to see their reaction. The HOA office was located in a fancy clubhouse at the entrance to the Pinewood Hills development. It was one of those sprawling new communities with McMansions packed close together, all in beige and gray with identical landscaping. The kind of place where every mailbox had to be the same approved color, and you could get fined for parking your car in your own driveway overnight. I waited in my truck while the process server went inside. Through the large windows, I could see him hand the envelope to a woman at the reception desk. She opened it, read it, and her face went bright red. She started yelling, though I couldn't hear the words. She picked up the phone and made a call, gesturing wildly with her free hand. The process server came back to his car, gave me a thumbs up, and drove off. I decided to wait a bit longer. 10 minutes later, a white Mercedes SUV screeched into the parking lot. A woman in her late 40s climbed out, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, wearing tennis clothes and enough diamond jewelry to fund a small country. She stormed into the clubhouse like a hurricane. That had to be the HOA president. My phone rang. It was Patricia. They just called my office. The HOA president, a woman named Linda Sutherland, wants to meet with us. She says this is all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. They blocked my road and demanded $5,000. I know, but let's hear what she has to say. I told her we could meet tomorrow morning at 10 at my office. Are you available? I'll make myself available. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandfather and all the work he put into that cabin. He bought the land when he came back from Korea, built the cabin with his own hands over the course of 2 summers. The road had been a massive undertaking. He'd hired help for that, clearing trees and grading the slope, putting down gravel. It cost him a fortune back then. And now these people thought they could just take it. The next morning, I arrived at Patricia's office 15 minutes early. Linda Sutherland showed up exactly on time with 2 men in expensive suits. One was her attorney, a slick-looking guy named Robert Chambers. The other was the HOA treasurer, Greg Hoffman. We all crammed into Patricia's conference room. Linda looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Mr. Xavier," she began without preamble, "this is a very simple situation that doesn't require legal action. Forest Creek Road has been maintained by Pinewood Hills HOA for the past 6 years. We've graded it, repaired it, and kept it clear of fallen trees and debris. The previous county records were unclear about ownership, so we assumed maintenance responsibility and therefore ownership. Surely you can understand our position. Patricia jumped in before I could respond. Mrs. Sutherland, your assumptions are not relevant. My client has clear deed to that road going back to 1952. You've been maintaining a road you don't own. That doesn't give you ownership rights. Robert Chambers cleared his throat. Miss Moreland, there's a concept called adverse possession. If the HOA has been maintaining the road for 6 years under claim of ownership, they may have a case for. North Carolina requires 20 years of continuous, hostile, open, and notorious use for adverse possession claims. Patricia cut him off. 6 years doesn't even come close. Furthermore, the use must be without permission. My client was unaware of your maintenance activities and therefore didn't grant or deny permission. That breaks the hostility requirement. I watched Linda's face as the reality sank in. She wasn't used to being told no. That much was obvious. Fine, Linda said through gritted teeth. Then Mr. Xavier needs to reimburse the HOA for 6 years of road maintenance. We've spent over $40,000 on that road. No, I said simply. I didn't ask you to maintain it. My grandfather maintained it for 60 years without your help. You chose to do that work without verifying ownership. That's not my problem. This is ridiculous, Linda's voice rose. You can't just claim ownership of a road that hundreds of people use. What? I leaned forward. What are you talking about? That road goes from the highway directly to my cabin. It's a dead end. Who else is using it? Greg Hoffman, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably. Well, we've been allowing homeowners to use it for hiking and ATV riding. It's become quite popular, actually. Very scenic. I felt my jaw clench. You've been letting people trespass on my private road, on my property. It's not your property, Linda insisted. We have documentation that says. Patricia slapped a folder on the table. I've already filed corrections with the county. The erroneous records have been amended. Mr. Xavier's ownership is now clearly reflected in all official documents. The gate you installed is trespassing. You have until Friday at 5 p.m. to remove it, or we're filing for a restraining order and a lawsuit for damages, trespass, and harassment. This meeting is over. We stood up. Linda looked like she wanted to explode, but Robert put a hand on her arm and shook his head. They left without another word. That went well, Patricia said dryly. Be careful, Aaron. Women like that don't like losing. She's going to try something. She was right. Wednesday morning, I got a call from my boss. Aaron, we just received a very strange complaint about you from a Linda Sutherland. She claims you've been threatening her and harassing the homeowners association she manages. What's going on? I explained the entire situation. My boss, thankfully, was a reasonable man. That's insane. Don't worry about it. I'll file her complaint where it belongs. But heads up, she's also contacted the Better Business Bureau and left negative reviews on every professional profile I could find for you. After I hung up, I checked online. Sure enough, Linda had created multiple fake accounts to leave 1-star reviews on my LinkedIn, on my engineering firm's website, and on every professional directory that listed me. She claimed I was unprofessional, aggressive, and dishonest. I forwarded everything to Patricia. Add defamation to the lawsuit, she said. Document everything. Thursday, I drove up to check on the gate. It was still there. In fact, they'd added a chain and a bigger lock. I took photos and sent them to Patricia. Friday came and went. The gate stayed put. Monday morning, Patricia filed the lawsuit in county court and requested an emergency hearing for the restraining order. The hearing was scheduled for Wednesday. I took another day off work and met Patricia at the courthouse in Asheville. Linda showed up with Robert Chambers and a whole entourage of HOA board members, including Greg and the secretary, a nervous-looking woman named Michelle Porter. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Sandra Martinez. She reviewed the filings, examined the deed documents, and listened to both sides present their arguments. Robert Chambers tried to claim adverse possession, prescriptive easement, and public necessity. Patricia tore each argument apart with case law and facts. The deed was irrefutable. The timeline didn't support adverse possession. There was no prescriptive easement because my grandfather's use had been continuous, and there was no public use prior to the HOA's illegal gate. And public necessity didn't apply because alternative routes existed for the HOA's hiking trails. Judge Martinez took about 5 minutes to decide. The evidence is clear. Mr. Xavier owns Forest Creek Road and the land beneath it. The gate installed by Pinewood Hills HOA is trespassing and must be removed immediately. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. The HOA has until tomorrow at noon to remove the gate and all associated signage, or they will be held in contempt of court. Furthermore, the HOA is ordered to cease all activities on Forest Creek Road, including but not limited to maintenance, recreation, and blocking access. The civil suit will proceed to determine damages. Linda stood up. Your Honor, this is absurd. We have 300 families in our community who use that road for recreation. You're taking away their rights, Mrs. Sutherland, the judge said coldly. Those families have been trespassing on private property. They have no rights to that road. The landowner has been generous in not pressing charges. I suggest you don't push your luck. Sit down. I tried not to smile too broadly as we left the courtroom. Patricia was thrilled. That was beautiful. Now we just wait for them to remove the gate and then we move forward with the damages phase. I drove up to the cabin that evening. The gate was still there. I took time-stamped photos and called Patricia. They haven't removed it. It's not noon tomorrow yet. Let's see if they comply. The next day at 11 a.m., I was parked on the highway below the gate with Patricia in her car next to me. We waited. Noon came and went. No one showed up. Patricia called the courthouse and reported the violation. Judge Martinez issued a contempt order and set another hearing for Friday morning. She also authorized me to remove the gate myself and bill the HOA for the cost. I called a locksmith and a welding company. By 3 p.m., we had cut through the chain, removed the gate from its hinges, and hauled it away. I installed a new gate with my own lock at the entrance. I also put up a sign. Private road, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted. The locksmith charged me $200. The welding company charged $500. I documented everything. That evening, I finally made it to my cabin. It felt like coming home after a war. I sat on the porch, drank a beer, and watched the sunset over the mountains. This was what my grandfather had built. This peace, this quiet, this sanctuary. I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. Friday morning's contempt hearing was intense. Judge Martinez was furious that the HOA had ignored her order. Linda tried to claim she hadn't been properly notified, but Patricia produced the certified mail receipts and email confirmations. Mrs. Sutherland, I'm fining Pinewood Hills HOA $5,000 for contempt of court. If you violate any further court orders, the fines will double each time, and I will consider criminal sanctions against you personally as HOA president. Do you understand? Linda nodded, her face pale. The civil suit was set for trial in 3 months. In the meantime, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. I went to work, I visited my cabin on weekends, and I enjoyed my private road in peace. Or so I thought. 2 weeks after the contempt hearing, I drove up to the cabin on a Saturday morning and found 3 ATVs parked on my road about halfway to the cabin. A group of teenagers were riding around, tearing up the gravel and leaving deep ruts. I stopped my truck and got out. "Hey, this is private property, you need to leave." One of the kids, a cocky-looking boy about 17, laughed. "Dude, this is HOA land. My mom's on the board. We can ride here whenever we want." "Your mom is wrong. I own this road. I have a court order that says so. You're trespassing." "Whatever, old man. Call the cops if you care so much." They revved their engines and took off further up the road toward my cabin. I did exactly that. I called the sheriff's department and reported trespassing and property damage. A deputy arrived 40 minutes later. By that time, the kids had gotten bored and left, but the damage to the road was obvious. Deputy Frank Morrison walked the road with me, taking photos of the ruts and tire tracks. "Do you know who they were?" One of them said his mom is on the HOA board. There are only 5 board members. "Shouldn't be hard to figure out. I'll follow up with the HOA. In the meantime, you might want to put up some cameras. If they come back, we'll have evidence for charges." I spent the rest of the weekend installing trail cameras at 3 points along the road. They were motion activated and sent alerts to my phone. Sure enough, the following Saturday, I got an alert at 9 a.m. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone and saw 4 ATVs and a dirt bike racing up my road. I immediately called the sheriff and drove up from Charlotte. Deputy Morrison and another deputy were waiting when the trespassers came back down the road 2 hours later. They pulled them over and checked IDs. All 5 were teenagers, and 3 of them were children of HOA board members, including Linda Sutherland's son, Kyle. The deputies issued citations for trespassing and reckless operation of off-road vehicles on private property. They also called the parents. I stood by my truck and watched as Linda Sutherland came roaring up in her Mercedes. She jumped out and immediately started yelling at the deputies. "You can't cite my son. He was on HOA property. This man is harassing us." Deputy Morrison, bless him, was completely unfazed. "Madam, we've reviewed the court orders. This is private property owned by Mr. Xavier. Your son was trespassing. The citation stands. This is ridiculous." "I'm calling my lawyer." "That's your right, madam, but your son still needs to appear in court on these charges. And madam, if you don't stop yelling, I'm going to cite you for disorderly conduct." Linda looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over." "It should be," I said quietly. "Just leave my property alone." She grabbed Kyle and shoved him into her car, then peeled out in a spray of gravel. The other parents were more reasonable. They apologized, promised their kids wouldn't come back, and left without incident. One of them, a tired-looking man named David Chen, actually approached me before leaving. "Mr. Xavier, I'm sorry about this. Linda told us at the last board meeting that the court case was just a formality and we'd win on appeal. She said it was fine for our kids to use the road. I should have verified that myself. I apologize. I appreciate that. I don't want trouble, I just want to be left alone. I understand. For what it's worth, not everyone on the board agrees with how Linda's handling this. She's very intense." That was putting it mildly. The following week, Patricia called me. "Aaron, we need to talk. The HOA's attorney just filed a countersuit." "For what?" "Basically everything they can think of. They're claiming you've damaged their property by removing the gate, that you've harassed board members, that you've created a public nuisance by blocking access to recreational areas, and that you owe them for road maintenance. It's all garbage, but we have to respond." "How much is this going to cost in legal fees?" "Don't worry about that right now. We're going to win and they're going to pay. But I need you to document every interaction you have with anyone from the HOA. Every phone call, every email, every encounter. Keep records of everything. I started a detailed log. I also upgraded my cabin's security, installing more cameras and a reinforced lock on the gate. It was a good thing I did. 3 weeks later, I got a motion alert from my gate camera at 2 in the morning. I pulled up the feed and watched as someone cut my chain with bolt cutters and drove a pickup truck through the gate, leaving it hanging open. I called 911 and the sheriff's department. Then I called Patricia. Then I got dressed and started the 2-hour drive to the cabin. The deputies arrived before I did. They called me on the way. "Mr. Xavier, we've got a situation here. There are 5 people on your property having a party at your cabin. They claim Linda Sutherland gave them permission to use it. I never gave anyone permission. They're trespassing. I want them arrested." When I arrived, there were 3 sheriff's vehicles parked on my road. The trespassers were sitting in the back of the patrol cars. Deputy Morrison met me at my cabin. "Mr. Xavier, I'm really sorry about this. They broke into your cabin, drank your beer, and were using your fireplace. We're charging all 5 with breaking and entering, trespassing, and theft. We've taken photos of the damage. The cabin was a mess. Someone had tracked mud all over the floors. My grandfather's old rocking chair was broken. They'd gone through my things, left trash everywhere, and helped themselves to not just my beer but also the good whiskey I kept for special occasions. I gave my statement to the deputies, and then spent the next few hours cleaning up and documenting the damage. The broken chair made me angrier than anything else. My grandfather made that chair himself. It was irreplaceable. I sent everything to Patricia along with the camera footage. "This has gone way too far," I told her. "Linda Sutherland told these people they could use my property. She's orchestrating this harassment." "I agree. We're going to add this to the lawsuit and request additional damages for emotional distress and harassment. We're also going to request that the court order Linda Sutherland to cease all contact with you and stop encouraging trespassing on your property." The 5 trespassers were charged with felony breaking and entering. During their arraignment, 3 of them immediately took plea deals and testified that Linda Sutherland had told them the cabin was HOA property that was in dispute, and they were helping the HOA establish use rights. One of them had text messages from Linda encouraging them to use the property. That changed everything. Patricia immediately filed an emergency motion. Judge Martinez scheduled a hearing for the following Monday. This time, Linda showed up without her lawyer. Robert Chambers had apparently dropped her as a client once the criminal activity came to light. Judge Martinez was livid. "Mrs. Sutherland, I have reviewed the evidence, including text messages from your phone encouraging people to trespass on Mr. Xavier's property. I have testimony from multiple witnesses that you told them it was acceptable to break into his cabin. You are hereby ordered to cease all contact with Mr. Xavier, directly or indirectly. You are not to discuss his property with anyone. You are not to encourage anyone to trespass or damage his property. If you violate this order in any way, I will hold you in contempt, and you will face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit trespassing and breaking and entering. Do you understand?" Linda's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." "Furthermore, the HOA board needs to remove you as president. If you are still serving in that capacity in 1 week, I will hold the entire board in contempt. This vendetta ends now." The board held an emergency meeting 3 days later. David Chen, the man who had apologized to me after his son was cited for trespassing, called me afterward. "Mr. Xavier, I wanted you to know that we voted to remove Linda as president. The vote was 4-1 with Linda being the only dissenting vote. I'm the new president, temporarily." I want to apologize on behalf of the entire HOA for everything that's happened. This should never have escalated to this point. We'd like to settle the lawsuit if possible. Patricia and I met with the new HOA board the following week. The meeting was completely different from the first one. These were reasonable people who just wanted the nightmare to end. David spoke for the group. Mr. Xavier, we've reviewed everything. You clearly own the road. We were misled by Linda about the facts and the law. We want to settle this as fairly as possible. We'll pay for all damages to your property, including the broken chair. We'll pay all your legal fees. We'll pay for repairs to the road from the ATV damage. And we'll issue a formal apology and send written notice to all HOA members that Forest Creek Road is private property and trespassing will result in immediate fines and potential legal action. What about the $5,000 contempt fine Judge Martinez ordered? I asked. We're working with the court on a payment plan for that. That's our responsibility, not yours. Patricia and I stepped out to discuss. What do you think? I asked her. I think they're being reasonable. We could push for more, maybe get additional damages for emotional distress. But honestly, I think this is a good resolution. The board is under new management. They're taking responsibility, and you'll be made whole financially. Plus, you'll have peace of mind knowing the HOA membership has been officially notified. What about Linda? She's facing potential criminal charges if the DA decides to prosecute based on the testimony from those trespassers. She's also been removed from the board, and she's a pariah in her own community. I'd say she's gotten consequences. We went back in and accepted the settlement. The final amount was $68,000, which covered all damages, legal fees, road repairs, and a premium for the irreplaceable items like my grandfather's chair. It also included installation of a proper automatic gate with a security code at my expense, which the HOA would pay for as part of the settlement. The HOA sent out a detailed letter to all 300 families in Pinewood Hills explaining the situation and making it clear that Forest Creek Road was private property. They included a map showing the boundaries and alternative trails for hiking and recreation within the HOA's actual property. Patricia helped me draft a response letter that I posted on the community bulletin board. I kept it simple. To the residents of Pinewood Hills, I appreciate the new board's willingness to resolve this situation fairly. I have no ill will toward the community as a whole. My only goal is to enjoy my family's property in peace, as we have for over 70 years. I ask that you respect the privacy of Forest Creek Road and my cabin. Thank you for your understanding. Aaron Xavier. The DA ultimately decided not to press criminal conspiracy charges against Linda. The 5 trespassers had already been charged and convicted, and the DA felt that was sufficient. However, Linda faced civil lawsuits from 3 of those trespassers who claimed she'd misled them, resulting in their criminal records. I heard through the grapevine that she and her husband ended up selling their house and moving to Florida to escape the social fallout. Life settled down after that. I had my new automatic gate installed, along with additional security cameras and better lighting. The settlement money also allowed me to make some improvements to the cabin that I'd been putting off, including a new roof and updated plumbing. About 6 months after everything was resolved, I was at the cabin on a Sunday afternoon when I heard a vehicle coming up the road. I tensed, reaching for my phone, but then I saw it was David Chen in a sensible Subaru wagon. He parked at a respectful distance and got out slowly, hands visible. "Mr. Xavier, I hope it's okay that I'm here. I wanted to bring you something." He reached into his car and pulled out a rocking chair. Not just any rocking chair, a beautiful handcrafted piece that looked remarkably similar to my grandfather's broken chair. I walked over, stunned. "David, what is this?" My father is a woodworker. I showed him photos of your grandfather's chair from the police report. He felt terrible about what happened and wanted to make you a replacement. Obviously, it's not the same, but he tried to match the style and craftsmanship. He wouldn't accept any payment. He said it was the right thing to do. I ran my hand over the smooth wood. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. "David, I don't know what to say. Thank you, and please thank your father." "There's something else. My father found this at an estate sale. He thought you might want it." David handed me a worn leather journal. It's a woodworking journal from the 1950s. The guy who kept it was a carpenter who worked on a lot of the old mountain cabins around here. There are some entries about a cabin on Forest Creek. My father thinks it might be yours. I opened the journal carefully. The entries were dated between 1951 and 1956. I flipped through until I found an entry from July 1952. "Helped Christopher Xavier with the framing on his cabin today. Good man. Knows his way around a hammer. Going to be a fine place once it's finished." The road up was rough, but his survey and grading work is solid. My throat tightened. "David, this is incredible. Thank you." "You're welcome. Look, I know you have no reason to trust any of us after everything that happened, but if you ever need anything, please let me know. The HOA board takes full responsibility for what happened under Linda's leadership. We want to be good neighbors, even if we're not right next door." After David left, I sat in the new rocking chair on my cabin porch and read through the journal. There were dozens of entries about my grandfather and the cabin. Reading about him as a young man, just back from Korea, building his dream with his own hands, made me feel connected to him in a way I hadn't since he died. That evening, I called my aunt, my grandfather's daughter, and told her the whole story. She laughed and cried in equal measure. "Your grandfather would have been so proud of you," she said. "He protected that property his whole life. He knew exactly what he had, and he made sure the deeds were perfect so no one could ever take it away. He told me once that the cabin wasn't just about having a place in the mountains. It was about standing your ground and not letting anyone push you around. Sounds like you learned that lesson." I just did what had to be done. That's exactly what he would have said. The trial date for the civil suit came and went without a trial. With the settlement signed and paid, there was nothing left to litigate. Patricia sent me a final bill showing zero balance owed, with all fees paid by the HOA as agreed. I framed the corrected deed and hung it in the cabin next to my grandfather's original deed from 1952. 2 pieces of paper, 70 years apart, proving that sometimes the system works if you're patient and you're right. Work continued as normal. My boss was thrilled with how everything turned out, and even used the story as an example during a company meeting about the importance of proper documentation and record-keeping in engineering. Several coworkers asked me for Patricia's contact information, apparently having their own property disputes. Spring came to the mountains, and the dogwoods bloomed along Forest Creek Road. I spent a weekend clearing the winter debris and reseeding the spots where the ATVs had torn up the edges. The road looked better than it had in years. One Saturday in May, almost a year after the initial gate incident, I was replacing some boards on the cabin porch when I heard an engine. This time I didn't panic. The camera alert showed a sheriff's vehicle. Deputy Morrison parked and walked up with a smile. "Mr. Xavier, just doing a patrol of the area and wanted to check in. Everything good up here?" "Everything's great, Frank. Want a beer?" We sat on the porch and talked about nothing in particular. He mentioned that the county had seen a big decrease in trespassing complaints in the Pinewood Hills area, since the HOA sent out their notice. People respect clear boundaries, Frank said. The problem before was that Linda was telling folks one thing while the law said another. Now everyone knows the score and it's been peaceful. That's how it should be. After Frank left, I sat in my new rocking chair and looked out over the mountains. A hawk circled overhead. The creek babbled in the distance. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees my grandfather had planted 70 years ago. This was worth fighting for. Not just the property, not just the principle, but the peace. The knowledge that this place would be here, unchanged, waiting for me whenever I needed to escape the chaos of the modern world. My grandfather understood that. That's why he was so careful with the deeds, why he built everything to last. I thought about Linda Sutherland and wondered if she ever understood what she was really fighting over. It wasn't about the road or the money or even the power. It was about a man's right to his own land, to his own legacy, to the sanctuary his grandfather built with his own hands. She'd turned it into a war over pride and control. I'd simply defended what was already mine. In the end, the law was clear. The deeds were clear. The court was clear. And now, finally, the peace was clear too. I spent that whole weekend at the cabin, completely unplugged from email and work calls. I hiked the ridge behind the property, the same trails my grandfather had shown me when I was 8 years old. I fished in the creek, catching and releasing 3 rainbow trout. I cooked steaks on the old charcoal grill and watched the stars come out. Sunday evening, as I was packing up to head back to Charlotte, I noticed something carved into one of the porch posts that I'd never seen before. It must have been revealed when I replaced the old boards. The wood was weathered, but the words were still legible. See, Xavier, 1952, built to last. My grandfather had literally carved his claim into the foundation of this place. Built to last, indeed. I locked up the cabin, secured the gate, and drove down Forest Creek Road with a deep sense of contentment. The road was smooth under my tires, the trees formed a green canopy overhead, and the evening light painted everything gold. This was mine. Not because I fought for it, but because it was always mine. The fight just made sure everyone else knew it too. Back in Charlotte, I returned to my normal routine, but something had shifted. I found myself thinking more carefully about what really mattered. The cabin wasn't just a retreat anymore. It was a reminder that some things are worth standing up for, that documentation and truth matter, that patience and persistence beat aggression and bluster. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail from someone I'd never heard of, Margaret Chen. It took me a moment to realize it must be David's wife. The letter was brief. Dear Mr. Xavier, you don't know me, but my husband David has told me all about what happened with the HOA and your property. I wanted you to know that your stand inspired several of us to push back against some unreasonable rules the old board had implemented. We've made changes to the HOA governing documents to require better verification of property claims and to limit the board's authority to act without proper legal review. Your situation was a wake-up call for our whole community. Thank you for standing your ground. Sincerely, Margaret Chen. I showed the letter to Patricia over coffee one afternoon. She smiled. That's the best outcome you could hope for. You didn't just win your case. You changed how they operate. That means it won't happen to someone else. I just wanted my road back, and you got it. But you also got justice, accountability, and precedent. That's a clean sweep. The following year passed quietly. No more HOA drama, no more trespassing, no more midnight break-ins or ATV vandals, just peaceful weekends at the cabin and steady work in Charlotte. I started dating someone I met through friends, a botanist named Emma Thornton who specialized in native mountain plants. When I finally brought her up to the cabin, she was enchanted. "Aaron, this place is incredible. Some of these trees are over 100 years old. And that oak grove your grandfather planted those. Everyone. He wanted fast-growing shade, said he was planting them for his grandchildren." Emma walked the property with the eye of a scientist, identifying species and pointing out which plants were native and which were introduced. She found wild ginseng growing near the creek and got more excited than I'd ever seen her. "You know how rare this is. Wild ginseng is almost impossible to find anymore. Your grandfather must have protected this whole ecosystem." I'd never thought about it that way. To me, the cabin was about the structure, the road, the legal rights. But Emma saw it as a preserved piece of natural history, a snapshot of what these mountains looked like before development changed everything. "You should put this in a conservation easement," she said over dinner that night. "Protect it permanently so no one can develop it after you're gone." It was a good idea. I spent the next few months working with a land trust to establish a conservation easement that would keep the property undeveloped in perpetuity. My grandfather had protected it in his lifetime. I'd protected it from the HOA. Now it would be protected forever. When I signed the easement papers, Patricia was there as my attorney once again. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. "You've taken his legacy and made sure it lasts beyond your own lifetime." 2 years after the initial gate incident, I got a phone call from a journalist writing a story about HOA overreach in North Carolina. Someone had given her my name. She wanted to interview me about my experience. I was reluctant at first, but Patricia encouraged me. "Your story illustrates a real problem. A lot of people don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back like you did. If telling your story helps someone else, it's worth it." The article ran in a Raleigh newspaper and then got picked up by several other outlets. I started getting calls and emails from people with similar situations. People whose HOAs were claiming ownership of roads, easements, or even parts of their property. People who were being bullied and didn't know how to fight back. I couldn't help everyone, but I shared Patricia's contact information and offered what advice I could. The most important thing, I told them all, was documentation. Know what you own. Keep your deeds safe. Verify everything with the county records office. Don't assume the HOA knows what they're talking about. Several people took my advice and won their cases. Each time I heard about another victory against HOA overreach, I felt a little bit of vindication for my grandfather, for everyone who'd been pushed around by people who thought their authority exceeded their actual rights. Life moved forward. Emma and I got serious. I proposed to her on the cabin porch in my grandfather's rocking chair, the reproduction of it. She said yes without hesitation. "But I have one condition," she said with a smile. "We keep this place exactly as it is. No development, no changes except what's needed for maintenance. This is sacred ground. Deal." We got married in a small ceremony in Charlotte, but we spent our honeymoon at the cabin. Emma wanted to catalog every plant species on the property, and I wanted to show her the old woodworking journal and tell her all the stories my grandfather had told me about building the place. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma said, "You know what I love about this place? It's honest. Your grandfather built something real with his own hands, and he protected it with proper documentation and planning. No shortcuts, no assumptions. Just hard work and doing things right. That's rare these days." She was right. In a world of HOA disputes and legal gray areas and people trying to take what wasn't theirs, my grandfather had done everything correctly. The road deed, the property deed, the survey markers, the records, all of it was precise and legal and incontestable. That's what saved me when Linda Sutherland tried to steal what wasn't hers. That's what gave Judge Martinez a clear case to rule on. That's what made the whole thing, ultimately, a victory not just for me but for everyone who believes in property rights and the rule of law. 3 years after the initial incident, I was at the cabin when David Chen called me. "Aaron, I wanted to give you a heads up. Linda Sutherland is back in the area. She and her husband moved back from Florida. They bought a house in a different development, but I heard she's been asking questions about you and the cabin." My stomach tightened. "What kind of questions?" "Just whether you still own it, whether you're there often. I think she's just being nosy, but I wanted you to be aware. The restraining order from Judge Martinez expired last year." I thanked David and immediately called Patricia. "Can we renew the restraining order?" "Not without evidence of new harassment or threats, but let's be proactive. I'll send her a letter reminding her of the previous court orders and warning her that any harassment will result in immediate legal action. That might be enough to keep her away." The letter went out. I didn't hear anything more about Linda for several months, and I started to relax. Then one Saturday morning, I got a motion alert from my gate camera. I pulled up the feed and saw Linda Sutherland standing at the gate, taking photos with her phone. She wasn't trying to enter, just standing outside the gate taking pictures. I called the non-emergency sheriff's line and reported it. Deputy Morrison, who was now a sergeant, called me back within an hour. "Aaron, we sent a deputy out there. She was gone by the time he arrived, but we have her on your camera footage. Technically, she's on the public road at that point, so she's not trespassing. But we'll document this. If she comes back or if she tries to contact you, let us know immediately." I sent the footage to Patricia. She sent another letter, this one more strongly worded, reminding Linda that while she had a right to use the public road, any harassment or attempt to interfere with my use of my property would result in legal action. The photos Linda took showed up on a blog post a week later. She'd started a website about HOA rights and property owner abuse. My cabin and gate were featured prominently, with false claims that I'd stolen HOA property, and that the courts had ruled incorrectly based on fabricated documents. Patricia filed a cease and desist immediately, threatening defamation action. The blog post came down within 24 hours, and Linda's website disappeared entirely shortly after. That was the last I heard from Linda Sutherland. Whatever vendetta she'd been nursing, it apparently wasn't worth facing another lawsuit. 5 years after the initial gate incident, Emma and I had our first child, a son we named Christopher after my grandfather. When he was old enough, I took him up to the cabin and told him the whole story. He was only 3, too young to understand the legal complexities, but he loved seeing the creek and the trees and the cabin his great-great-grandfather had built. "This will be yours someday," I told him. "Your great-great-grandfather built it. Your great-grandfather protected it his whole life. I fought to keep it when people tried to take it. Now it's your turn to learn about it and love it and keep it safe." Christopher nodded solemnly, like he understood the weight of what I was saying. Maybe he did in his own way. That evening, I updated my will and my own property documents, making sure everything was just as clear and precise as my grandfather's had been. I included detailed notes about the history of the property, copies of all the court documents from the HOA dispute, and explicit instructions about the conservation easement. No one would ever again be able to claim they didn't know who owned Forest Creek Road. Emma found me on the porch later, reading through the old woodworking journal again. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about legacy and responsibility. My grandfather gave me something precious and I almost lost it because of lies and bullying." I want to make sure that never happens again. It won't. You've documented everything. You've fought the fight and won, and you've protected it permanently with the easement. Christopher will inherit something solid and secure. That's all you can do." She was right. I'd done everything I could to honor my grandfather's legacy and protect it for my son. The rest was up to time and the law. Now, 10 years after that initial gate incident, I still visit the cabin regularly. Christopher is 8 now, and he loves it as much as I did at his age. He's already talking about building a treehouse, just like I built when I was young. The HOA drama feels like ancient history. Pinewood Hills has changed management companies twice. Most of the original board members have moved away. The community itself has matured, with established trees and gardens replacing the stark new construction look it had when I first encountered them. David Chen is still there, and we've become genuine friends. He and his family sometimes stop by the gate to say hello when I'm visiting, but they never ask to come up the road. They respect the boundary, and I respect them for respecting it. I heard through David that Linda Sutherland eventually moved again, this time to Arizona. Her obsession with HOA politics apparently continued there, as she immediately joined her new HOA board and began a campaign to ban a neighbor's solar panels. Some people never learn. As for me, I learned that standing your ground is sometimes the only option. That documentation matters. That truth has power when it's backed by proper legal records. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is protect what your ancestors built, not just for yourself, but for the generations that come after. Every time I drive up Forest Creek Road, past the gate with my name on it, under the canopy of trees my grandfather planted, I feel a sense of peace and accomplishment. This is mine. Not because I conquered anyone or defeated anyone, but because it was always mine, and I had the courage to prove it when someone tried to take it away. The cabin stands solid and strong, just like my grandfather built it. Built to last, just like he carved into that porch post 70 years ago. And it will last, protected by conservation easement and clear legal title and the determination of 3 generations of my family to keep it exactly as it should be. That's the real victory. Not the lawsuit, not the court orders, not the settlement money. The real victory is knowing that Christopher will bring his own children here someday, and they'll look out over these same mountains, breathe this same clean air, and know that their family fought to preserve this place when it mattered most. Sometimes you have to stand up to bullies. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right. And sometimes, if you're lucky and you're prepared and you have truth on your side, you win. I won. My grandfather's legacy won. And that's all that matters. The road is mine. The land under it is mine. And no HOA board, no matter how aggressive or delusional, can ever change that fact. Forest Creek Road wins through the mountains, just as it has since 1952, carrying me home to the place my grandfather built with his own hands. That's my legacy. That's my inheritance. And I'll protect it with everything I have, just like he would have wanted. The story of how an HOA tried to block my road and steal my land could have ended badly. Instead, it ended exactly as it should have, with justice, with accountability, and with the rightful owner reclaiming what was always his. And every time I sit in that rocking chair on the porch, looking out over the land my grandfather claimed and tamed and loved, I know he's proud. Not because I'm stubborn or because I fought, but because I understood what he'd taught me all along. Know what's yours, protect what matters, and never let anyone take it away without a fight. That's the lesson I'll teach Christopher. That's the legacy that will continue long after I'm gone. And that's how you handle an HOA that doesn't know when to quit. You prove them wrong. You protect what's yours, and you make sure they never forget the day they tried to steal from the wrong person. Word count: approximately 12,000 words.